Next, let's talk about the cycle of microbial disease in a population. It involves 5 basic concepts: the pathogen itself, the reservoir or source of the pathogen, transmission to susceptible hosts, the portal of entry into that host, and then how that microbe exits out of the host to spread to other hosts. First, we'll talk about the reservoir. Reservoirs are the site in nature in which a microorganism can survive. Some pathogens have humans as their only reservoir. This includes measles and smallpox and chickenpox. Knowing this, we can target these diseases for total eradication from the planet, because all we would have to do is increase herd immunity enough that these diseases can no longer be harbored in the human body. Once that happens, these can be completely eliminated from the planet, as happened with smallpox. This is currently ongoing with polio, and polio is hopefully the next disease completely eradicated from our planet because, again, its only reservoir is humans. On the other hand, completely eliminating things like rabies, where the reservoir isn't just people but also includes dogs, many bats, skunks, foxes, raccoons, and other mammals. It would almost be impossible to eliminate this microbe from Earth because you'd have to vaccinate all of those different organisms against rabies. When we take a look at who spreads different infectious diseases, we can talk about different types of carriers. There are active carriers and passive carriers. An active carrier is a carrier who is an individual, a person who is suffering from an infectious disease. Symptomatic active carriers, or active carriers that are currently sick and have the disease itself, are easily identified. However, there are healthy carriers that are a little bit harder to identify. Different versions of these include incubation carriers, where they are not experiencing any symptoms, but they're currently in the incubation period of the disease, and so they can still spread the disease. A great example of this are HIV carriers, because the incubation period for this disease can be up to 10 years, where an individual is feeling relatively healthy, not sick, and thus unaware of the fact that they're infected with HIV, thereby spreading it to many other individuals, possibly. There are also chronic carriers, like Typhoid Mary, that we talked about earlier, who had come down with typhoid fever early in her life and then started spreading Salmonella typhi to individuals as an adult, not realizing that she was still harboring those bacteria in her appendix. There are also convalescent carriers, diphtheria having some of the longest convalescent carriers, that spread the disease to other individuals after they've overcome the illness. Diphtheria convalescent carriers can still spread the diphtheria disease for months or even up to a year after getting better. In the case of active carriers, humans are playing the role of reservoir. However, there are other reservoirs to consider, including reservoirs that involve domesticated and wild animals. Many different mammals can act as reservoirs of human diseases, and the closer those mammals are to humans, evolutionarily and physiologically, the easier it is for that microbe to cross the species barrier, moving from a different species into the human species. This is thought to have happened with HIV, which is thought to have evolved from SIV, or simian immunodeficiency virus, basically transmitting that virus from monkeys or chimpanzees into humans. These type of diseases that are transmitted from animal to human are what are referred to as zoonotic diseases. And these become particularly challenging because, again, to eradicate the disease, you'd have to eliminate the disease in the reservoir as well. However, reservoirs aren't even just limited to living things. There are also non-living reservoirs as well. Soil can be a non-living reservoir for microbes such as tetanus, and it can also be a non-living reservoir for helminth eggs, such as Ascaris worms. It is also not uncommon for water to be a non-living reservoir or a carrier of certain infectious diseases like Giardia. Your book has a nice table of non-living reservoirs and where they might be found. The next thing to consider when we talk about the spread of infectious disease and the patterns in a population is the mode of transmission from person to person, or the bridge between reservoir and people. In this case, a focus is made on the portal of entry. The portal of entry is the site at which the microbe enters the host. The mode of transmission is how that infectious agent is spread through the environment to another person. The most common type of spread of transmission is direct transmission, where it's spread from person to person directly. In this case, there is a direct connection between the portal of exit, or how the microbe exits an individual, and the portal of entry, so how the microbe enters the next host. A great example of this is the transmission seen in a sneeze. A sneeze is exhaled out of the respiratory system from an infected host and gets into the next host through the portal of entry, also by the respiratory system, either by inhaling droplets or touching a surface that has the droplets and then touching the mucous membranes associated with the next host. Usually, the portal of exit mirrors the portal of entry because the microbes are often adapted for that specific organ system. So for instance, foodborne illnesses are not uncommonly transmitted by an individual not washing their hands after going to the bathroom. This is what's referred to as the oral fecal route, where the microbe is acquired by eating, enters the digestive tract, and then exits that infected host in order to get to the next host by leaving the digestive tract in the fecal form. This concept of the portal of entry mirroring the portal of exit is also seen in sexual transmission of STIs, or sexually transmitted infections. The way they are usually acquired is by sexual activity, and the way they usually exit an infected host in order to enter the next host is by sexual activity. Direct transmission can involve transmission horizontally or vertically. Horizontal transmission is from person to person, whereas vertical transmission is specifically from mother to offspring through the placenta. This can include the Zika virus, HIV, and measles. Those are all examples of direct transmission, but there's also indirect transmission. Indirect transmission involves the passage of an infectious agent from a human being to a reservoir or alternative species, and then back to another human being. This could involve the use of an intermediate host. The intermediate vehicle can be living or non-living. So we can have the disease being transmitted into waterways in the environment, or into an insect vector. Vehicle-borne transmission is one in which there's food, water, a biological product, or an inanimate object known as a fomite that can carry the infectious disease for a short period of time as it moves from host to host. In this case, humans don't necessarily need to be in the same space or even have met the host that infected them. Waterborne transmission is a serious issue around the world and is another great reason why we should make clean water available to all humans on Earth. The rate of disease transmission would drop precipitously. Fomites also play a significant role in transmission. This could include a doorknob, desk surface, escalator rails, computer keyboards, and public phones. It's fairly well understood that fomites play a significant role in the transmission of pathogens in hospitals as well. Again, doorknobs, but also bedding, clothing, bed rails, computer keyboards and mice, and water faucets and toilets. Aerosols are another type of indirect transmission. Unlike droplet transmission, where the droplets are much bigger and thus only last in the air for a shorter period of time, aerosols can remain in the air for a much longer period of time because they are extremely small. Aerosols can cause outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease, valley fever, coccidioidomycosis, and other illnesses. Even measles is known to be spread by aerosolized transmission. Because only one measles viral particle is needed to transmit from person to person, these small aerosolized particles can carry an infective dose from host to host. A third type of indirect transmission is by vectors, or an organism, a different species, that transmits disease from human to human. One of the most common vectors are arthropod or insect vectors. Some of the more common of these include ticks, mosquitoes, tsetse flies, fleas, kissing bugs, and others. It is the knowledge of these various arthropod vectors that have led public health departments around the country to spray insecticide around neighborhoods while people sleep at night. This has been going on for decades and still occurs today. In particular, in the Bay Area, insecticide spraying is used to control West Nile virus and is done in order to kill mosquitoes in various neighborhoods where West Nile virus has been detected in avian populations. All of these various insect vectors that we've talked about so far are biological vectors because each one of these that we've named actually become infected themselves and sick from the various diseases they carry. So for instance, fleas with bubonic plague actually become sick with bubonic plague as they're transmitting it from person to person. In the next section, we'll talk about other types of insect vectors, like mechanical vectors.